If you are following a chest day Monday, back day Tuesday, arms day Wednesday, shoulder day Thursday, legs day Friday split, and wondering why your muscle growth has stalled, why certain body parts lag behind no matter how hard you train them, and why you always feel either completely destroyed or completely understimulated depending on the day, then this video is going to tell you exactly why your workout split is the problem and not your effort, your genetics, or your nutrition. Because the way you organize your training across the week is not a minor detail that can be optimized later. It is the foundational architecture that determines whether the biological machinery of muscle growth operates at full capacity or spends most of the week completely idle while you believe you are training optimally. The core problem with the traditional bro split, one muscle group per day, trained once per week, is that it is built around a fundamental misunderstanding of how long muscle protein synthesis remains elevated after a training session. And this misunderstanding is costing you the majority of your potential weekly muscle growth. Research by Phillips, Tipton, and colleagues on post-exercise muscle protein synthesis shows that after a sufficiently challenging training session, muscle protein synthesis in the trained muscle rises sharply and remains elevated for approximately 24 to 48 hours before returning to baseline resting levels. Meaning, if you train your chest on Monday, your pectoral muscle is in an active growth state for 48 hours, returns to baseline by Wednesday, and then sits in a maintenance state doing absolutely nothing, productive from Wednesday through the following Monday when you train it again. That is 5 days per week, where your chest muscle has no elevated muscle protein synthesis, no active hypertrophic response, no growth occurring, and you are training it once per week, thinking you are maximizing your chest development when you are actually maximizing your chest's idle time. A landmark meta-analysis by Schoenfeld, Ogborn, and Krieger, published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, analyzed 10 studies comparing training frequency and found that muscles trained twice per week produced significantly greater hypertrophy than muscles trained once per week, even when total weekly volume was equated, and muscles trained 3 times per week showed further advantages for certain populations, confirming that the distribution of your training stimulus across the week is an independent variable that affects muscle growth above and beyond total volume. Meaning 2 people doing identical total weekly sets can have dramatically different muscle growth outcomes based purely on how those sets are distributed. And the person on the bro split doing 20 chest sets every Monday is growing less than the person doing 10 chest sets on Monday and 10 on Thursday, because the twice weekly stimulus keeps muscle protein synthesis elevated for a greater total proportion of the week. The second reason your split is bad goes into the psychology of training organization and the concept of fatigue management, which is the relationship between the training, stress you accumulate, and your body's capacity to recover from and adapt to that stress. On a bro split, every session is a maximum effort demolition of one muscle group. And while this feels productive and creates significant soreness, the research on effective reps and junk volume by Dr. Mike Israetel distinguishes between training sets that generate sufficient mechanical tension to stimulate hypertrophy and training sets performed in a state of such deep fatigue that the mechanical quality of the stimulus has degraded to the point where the set is generating fatigue without generating proportional adaptation. When you do your 15th set of chest exercises on a dedicated chest day, your muscle fibers are so fatigued that motor unit recruitment has declined, force production has dropped, and the mechanical tension being applied to your pectoral fibers is a fraction of what it was in your first 5 sets. You feel like you are training hard because you are exhausted, but your muscle is receiving a low-quality stimulus that is generating recovery debt without the corresponding hypertrophic return. And spreading that same volume across 2 sessions means every set you perform is executed with a higher quality of neuromuscular output because accumulated fatigue is lower, which means more effective reps, more mechanical tension per set, and more hypertrophic stimulus per unit of volume. The third reason your split is bad is specific to the arm and shoulder training, that bro splits isolate into dedicated days, and it connects to a cumulative weekly stimulus problem that most people never consider. If you train chest and back on separate days with no direct arm work, your biceps are being stimulated through rowing movements and your triceps through pressing movements, meaning by the time you get to your dedicated arm day, those muscles have already received indirect stimulus from 2 other sessions. And if your arm day happens to fall adjacent to those sessions in the weekly schedule, your arms are entering a dedicated training session in a pre-fatigued state that reduces the quality of every curl and extension you perform. The superior alternative that the research consistently supports is either a full body training split, performed 3 to 4 times per week, which maximizes training frequency for every muscle group simultaneously and is supported by the strongest evidence base for hypertrophy in both beginner and intermediate populations. Or an upper-lower split performed 4 days per week, which trains each muscle group twice weekly, allows sufficient recovery between sessions for the same muscle, and distributes volume across the week in a way that keeps muscle protein synthesis elevated for a substantially greater proportion of the week than any once-per-week approach. Your workout split is not a personal expression of your training philosophy. It is a logistical tool whose sole purpose is to organize your training stimulus in the way that maximizes the total time your muscles spend in an elevated muscle protein synthesis state across the week. And when you evaluate your current split through that single criterion, the once per week bro split fails so completely and so measurably that switching to a higher frequency approach is not a matter of preference or opinion. It is the most evidence-supported structural change you can make to your training program today.